What sort of study regime gets you to the top? In this second part of our interview with world quizzing champion Daoud Jackson, we find out. What does an average quiz week look for you in terms of the balance of learning new things, reviewing existing knowledge, playing quizzes? How do you spend your time?
Yeah, so these days, I guess I probably play an average of like three quizzes a week, probably around there, with some like bigger events mixed in. I don't do a huge number of quizzes. I'm not like up there with people who are playing as many, like every single possible quiz. But I'd say probably average of like three quizzes a week. In terms of flashcards, I think in the last year I've tried to reduce a bit. I mostly do them like on the tube. So I don't really like sit at home and do it. It tends to be like either I'm on the tube or like I'll go for a walk and do it on my phone. And I'd say probably in the realm of like 400 cards a day. It'll vary like how many new I do. I think probably the biggest thing that I've done recently is just to suspend lots of cards. So like over time, let's say you want to learn like a certain category of thing and you write like hundreds of cards. I think I wrote loads of cards of just like people who are in EastEnders, and like I have watched EastEnders. I've probably watched 100 episodes of EastEnders in my life, so not like completely unknown to me, but I don't really know like lots of things about EastEnders. So then I see these cards, and you go, "Who played, so and so in EastEnders?" And you see a name, and you don't know who the character is, and you don't know who the person is. And so what you actually have to do there is be like just honest with yourself, suspend the card, don't look at this like crap card anymore because there's basically no point. It's not useful to you. And so I think that the part of the process is probably just like purging things that you've seen as well. I think probably spending more time doing that is useful. So then you're reducing the number of cards you do, or just saying, okay, this card doesn't work. It's got too much stuff on it. It's not good. I just keep getting it wrong. Let me suspend it, come back to it, review the card, and actually learn the fact properly or think about it again. So I'd say that that's that. But in terms of like practice and whatever, I'll go through periods of writing more notes or more flashcards, and I'll go through periods of less. Probably try and review some things that I get wrong in quizzes, but I definitely take notes during a lot of quizzes and then don't read back through them. So, I'm about 6 or 7 years behind on going through the notes of things that I write down in quizzes. So, yeah, when I catch up, then I'll be good.
And I know a lot of people when they start building an Anki set or whatever, the temptation is to just import a whole load of stuff.
Yeah,
Because then you've got a base to work from, and I get that, but I found it interesting when I spoke to Victoria this time last year that she was saying um, she doesn't do that because then your set gets bloated with stuff you already know or stuff you're not interested in ever learning, and she
yeah,
focuses on just adding the stuff that she needs that
yeah.
fills in her gaps. Do you have that same kind of approach?
Yeah, so there's some cards that I generated like procedurally, as it were.
Mm.
Like, okay, I've got a list of loads of films and loads of directors or whatever. And then I generated cards, like who directed blah, blah, blah in this year. And those cards are not very memorable. So they're probably a waste of your time if you're going to see them loads more times each time to remember it, or you don't remember it, or you don't even know what the film is. I've got, or like, list of Billboard number 1 songs. Like if I don't, sometimes you might know who had a number 1 with whatever, and you don't even know the song. It's like this is a waste of time because trying to remember that is so difficult. So I think that bringing in loads of cards or generating them completely procedurally is probably not that useful. I think the thing is you have to realize that you know the learning doing flashcards is not an activity in and of itself. Let's say it's not useful per se. The thing is to actually learn things. It's not an act of memorizing. It's like the point is to learn these things. So the process of writing the cards is really important. And I think it's fine to just not have that many cards to start with, um, and just build up as you go along. Build up, try and remember things, and you're going to get through writing. Just write cards as you go along, and don't import huge numbers. But with AI and things like this, people will have the capacity to write more better cards, let's say, than they did before. And I think that in those cases, what you need to do is just start purging stuff. Like, you'll have cards where you don't like, I don't need a card that says what's the capital city of Slovakia or whatever. Right. There's a certain point where you're just going to know it. And there you can just delete cards. I think that being unafraid to say it doesn't have to be a compendium of every fact you ever want to know. Like delete cards, suspend them. So if you're on Anki or whatever, just having the buttons open where you can like mark that you're going to edit it later, delete it, suspend it, it is useful because then you're actually saying, okay, let me focus my time on being more efficient rather than learning through lists of things that, are useless or cards that are not well structured.
Because there are no prizes awarding for having a huge Anki deck. They're there to help you get the points when you need them. And if you're having to wade through stuff that's irrelevant or irrelevant cards are stopping you learning the things you need
Yeah.
to be learning, then it's not serving its purpose. You've got to be very disciplined about it then.
And I would say I have loads of cards that are terrible. Like now, if I look through, like if I went through 100 cards and asked
Mm,
how many of them are ever going to come up in a quiz, like
mm,
most of the time, a lot of it is just literally never going to come up, or it's got too much stuff on it.
mm,
So I think actually like going back down to the principles and trying to say, okay, what am I actually learning? What
mm,
am I reminding myself of? It is really important, and just like thinking back through that. And for some people, like it's not going to be emotive or it's not going to trigger things in the right way. So it doesn't have to be that you use flashcards or, I get fed up with doing flashcards at a certain point and then you go to do something else for a bit. Or, I mean, I carry on doing flashcards basically, but you do
mm.
other stuff as well. So it's change of pace, as it were.
So with your flashcard sets, two questions. One, um, are you writing them in a sort of question and answer format, or is it set of facts and then the related answer? And secondly, do you just have one big deck, or do you segment it by kind of topic or genre?
Segmented, partly for ease of just like looking through, and then also of like gaining stats. I think that probably it would be better if I was tagging everything correctly as I went through, but I don't. So
Mhm.
I have it in separate decks, and it allows you to be more deliberate about which new cards you introduce. So quite often, you'll go through something and you'll write like thousands of cards that are new in one category. But I don't want everything to be polluted by having too many cards from one category because then you find that like over a period of months, you're just going to have all of your reviews be these new cards you introduced. So, if you went through all the Olympics and you write like 1,000 cards or whatever, you can easily write way more than that for like the full Olympic stuff. So I have separate decks and then one big deck into which they all feed, and then you can play around with the settings. But I would like generally randomize reviews through the different subdecks. I would say, and then in terms of the actual card structure, like I would probably most of them are written as questions, which is probably not completely optimal, but yeah, they tend to be written as questions just because that's how I think of them. But you know, yeah, it's probably better to write them just as more isolated facts. But it depends exactly what you want to learn. I think the thing is to just have one core thing that you're trying to learn at a time, because you're not going to learn the second thing, as it were. You're not going to learn the weaker connection because your brain is just going to shortcut to the thing. So yeah, I think the thing as well is like when you have cards that are a certain way, if it doesn't work or you say, okay, I've learned this, tried to learn this many times and it fails, then suspend it, come back, and maybe you add an image or maybe you reword the card or maybe you look at the thing again, and then you'll be in a different place.
In terms of your general learning, then, because Anki is kind of an output of the learning you're doing, do you have a plan of kind of what topics you want to be addressing and how you're going to go about getting that knowledge, or is it a bit more ad hoc?
I'd say it's generally ad hoc. I have gone through periods where I've been like, okay, I really want to learn this. Let me spend time to go through it. Um, but generally, you get bored at a certain point and you change what you're doing. Like the commitment to actually fully go through a full topic all the way from start to finish is probably not there. I think over time, there's probably been periods where I've said, okay, I really want to learn this area. Let me really focus on this. But to go through things like completely comprehensively takes ages. Um, I give you an example. Like I made lots of plant notes because I don't really know plants, and I made all these notes about every like blooming plant. I think probably the whole thing is like it's genuinely it could be a book. It could be it's like hundreds of pages, and I don't know any of it really because it's too long, and I can't be bothered to read this whole book that I read about all these plants.
Mm.
Um, so you have to like find a balance of just like what you're actually going to do and what you're going to commit time to and what's going to be worthwhile basically, as you go through things in terms of process. But I think the thing as well is like we sort of come back to it, but start from the things that you don't know, build up through the process of going through those things. And I think trying to find, okay, when you see questions that you don't understand, saying, okay, what's the list I'm going to learn? What's the structure I'm going to learn this in? How am I going to learn this? What's a useful way? Is it going to be is is this something I can actually learn at this point, or do I need to just literally know more in order for it to make sense? And I think with things like science, there's a certain point where you go, okay, I can't actually learn lots of, difficult maths, like really hard maths trivia, because I just don't understand what the words in the question mean. So maybe I need to read a book, or maybe I need to engage with it in a different way before I get to the point of trying to learn this, because you're trying to learn things. You're not just trying to memorize things. I don't think that, I think probably it is plausible that somebody could be really good at quiz just by memorizing facts and not really understanding them. But the way that questions are structured and whatever would be quite difficult to do that on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I think particularly with science, having that underpinning knowledge is really helpful. Otherwise, it becomes word association, which is how it often is for me at buzzer quiz events where I won't understand what's going on, and I hear the phrase wave equation and I buzz in because I've heard of Schrodinger's wave equation, or there was one at the QLL one recently of a prefix, and I'd heard of isobutane, so I buzzed in for iso. I didn't actually understand the science at all. It was just word association. And I guess there is a place for that in areas where you don't have
Oh yeah.
knowledge, because it can at least give you a guess. But that underpinning knowledge, which means you understand the question earlier and you're not wasting time, is good. But where are you getting that from? Are you an internet person, a book person? Everybody's an internet person now, but what are your go-to sources?
I mean, I don't think everyone's an internet person, to be honest. There's some people who are still very good who are not
Yeah.
really like internet focused.
Mm,
I'd say definitely, yeah, more towards the internet side of
mm,
things as a basis. I mean, I definitely have books. It's useful as a resource. And you can go through on the book side of things, but I think from the pure quiz perspective, yeah, the internet is basically unrivaled and is more often than not also the source that people are writing things from.
mm,
So, you're getting it from the horse's mouth, as it were, for quiz purposes, but by using the internet. I think it's very hard to do it without the internet, and just linking between topics is useful. But for like starting from getting from, square one, then yeah, I think then probably books are useful to just gain the coherent understanding. And there's definitely times where you get fed up with stuff where you don't have like a coherent understanding, and you say, okay, I'm going to go and read a book about this. This will form the basis of like the structural understanding. And then when I've read the book, maybe I'll go back through the quizzy side of things and try and flesh it out after I've got the bare bones. So
because the difference is the depth, isn't it? In a book, you get a lot more depth, a lot more consideration, a lot more context potentially. In the internet tends to be shorter and more précis kind of things. But when you are looking on the net, are you going to Wikipedia, or do you go for other kind of subject specific kind of keystone sites?
I'd say a lot is Wikipedia. Yeah, yeah,
Mm,
Wikipedia is probably definite. Well, it's definitely number one. And then I think there's other stuff where you can go through like newsy type stuff. Like I'm not a big news person, partly because I feel like it's not the most efficient thing to do too much news stuff. I definitely got quite a lot of news questions wrong in the quiz, or questions that were newsable, as it were, of like people who died recently or things that
mm,
were in the news. But I feel like it's not that efficient to learn the news stuff at least first.
mm,
Like it definitely makes more sense to learn stuff that's not going to change before stuff that is going to change.
mm,
Um, but I'd say yeah, Wikipedia is like number one by a long way, and then news stuff is probably number two. Then there's other websites where you go, okay, these are quite interesting, of just like some Rolling Stone list or whatever. There's lots of websites where it's particular areas where you go through topic by topic and you find interesting lists or categories or whatever. You can find things as you go through, but I think that yeah, and I think over time it's just like depends what topic area you're looking in. Exactly.
yeah. How do you deal when you with a subject which either you find boring or just hard to engage with? But it's going to come up. How do you still manage to kind of overcome those barriers and get that knowledge into you?
I'd say some of that's probably competitive instinct over time is like that's part of it. I'd say the other thing is that over time you sort of get to a point where you say there's not many subjects that I don't find interesting. So these days I don't think there's that much where I'd like, okay, I don't find this interesting at all. I don't think there's really any area where I go completely like, no, I don't. I genuinely don't think there's anything now. I'm like, I have categorically no interest in it. So there's partly that. But in terms of getting over the hump, I think there's also a point where you are interested in things because they come up in quizzes and you want to win quizzes at a certain point. So it's like, okay, this is an area of interest for me for that reason, as it were. But I think it's just coming back and you don't have to do things comprehensively or, you don't have to be writing 500 pages of plant notes. It's not a good way to do it because you're not going to engage with it. It's like you build things up over time and then you've got the structure to grow organically from that basis rather than building just like a long chain. The more densely packed like your knowledge is, and then you can come back to it the next time and you've got more understanding. I think of that with actors. Like if I look back at 2016 or whatever, the depth of knowledge that I'll have about films will be terrible. Then you can go through, some famous films and you sort of know, okay, this one's that, or I sort of know who the main people in Casablanca are, or whatever. And then if I come back now, I know who more people are, if I'm engaged with more things, and you go, okay, oh, that guy's in other films, or this director's in whatever, or that you build up another level, and then you can go through, you look again and you'll know maybe 5 actors or 10 actors in this film, or more things about this, and so it builds up gradually. So I think that going down and saying, okay, I'm just going to have this subject down pat in one go is not really a useful way to do it because you don't have the density of like I'm using this word density quite a lot, but I think it's about having these stronger connections because then you're less likely to make mistakes, and then you can also build on it in a coherent way. Whereas if you're just learning single unitary facts, the connection is weaker, and also it's more easily broken in that sense, and you're less likely to have strong associations. So I have tried to learn long lists of things in the past, not very successfully. There's probably been years and years, and I don't know every UK number one down pat. And part of that is, if you don't know the songs or you don't have the engagement, then you don't know. Whereas if I started from scratch again and tried to learn it, I would find it a lot easier than I did when I started doing that probably, 8 years ago.
Are you quite forgiving of yourself when you make an error? How do you deal with that kind of the mistake thing, which happens to all of us? But I think how you deal with it is kind of critical. How do you cope with that?
I mean, to some extent, like I think that it's seeing it as part of the process. Like you are gonna make mistakes. You should expect to make mistakes. And like I've lost quizzes by one or two, but if you actually went through whoever beat you by one or two, they probably also made, a certain number of mistakes. So I don't think that if your expectation that is that in order to do well, I have to not make mistakes, then you're wrong. It's just like categorically wrong. You can win. I don't think there's ever been really a quiz where it's been won by like people not making any mistakes, as it were. So you can win quizzes and make mistakes, and it's about how many mistakes you make in a sense. On an emotional context, like I think partly it's you have to use that feeling basically to try and remember things, or it's helpful. You go, okay, I got that wrong. I remember getting this wrong. You're using that to like encode and strengthen memory. At the end, a lot of the memory stuff is very tied to emotion. And so like that's one of the things is like doing flashcards or learning stuff just in a sort of abiotic environment can only be so useful, and you have to sort of get your fingers dirty, as it were, in like actually playing quizzes and then engaging with it and talking to other people about it and playing the quiz. And that is like from just a pure memory perspective, you're not just encoding the fact, but you're encoding all of that memory of that incident with it as well. And I think that I definitely find that like my episodic memory is probably better than just like my pure like factual memory. Let's say I don't think I have like an amazing memory. I'm not like I wouldn't win a memory championship, or I can't memorize like a deck of cards or any of that stuff. So I think that the more like emotive context that you're associating with things, the better, because then you can say, okay, that's partly why writing is useful, because you can go, oh, I remember putting it in this quiz and we spoke about this, and I remember so and so got this right or whatever. You're attaching memory to you're attaching emotion to stuff, and that, like the science will tell you as well, makes things more effective. And so that's why a lot of people find that the best way is just playing quizzes, because then they can remember the emotion of getting it right or of getting it wrong or whatever. So that's partly what I think is satisfying about getting certain things is the emotion associated with them, and changing the emotion associated with them in that case. But I'd say, yeah, generally fairly forgiving. You got to be fairly stoic about these things. It's part of the the game of just remembering things and forgetting things and getting things wrong. So yeah, fairly. But I mean, you're asking me now after a week. If you ask me during the quiz, then I'm probably just like cursing at myself under my breath, saying that yeah,
it,
whatever, right? So yeah.
we talked about kind of solo prep, but is there a do you do any kind of preparation in collaboration with others? Is there kind of a community aspect to how you learn and how you improve?
Yeah, a bit, not that much. So some like team practices or whatever, there's a bit of that, but not as much as probably would be ideal. I think partly it's like when you're doing team quizzes and you talk with people, then you can understand how other people are doing things. Or you gain an understanding of what comes up in the quiz, and somebody says, "Okay, yeah, you should know this. This is famous." Blah 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 blah, whatever. So there is a big collaborative aspect. But like I don't really have like somebody I'm working with closely to do lots of prep or whatever. But in quizzes, you're engaging with other people all the time, so that it is fairly solo the effort, but yeah.
Because ultimately it has to be in your brain for it to be useful to you. So, but yeah, it's interesting.
I
The
think the
team
collaborative stuff
dynamic.
is helpful. Yeah, it definitely is helpful.
Yeah.
It's like also just one, you're going to have a different engagement if you're engaging with stuff with other people
Mm,
because you know the emotional context, as I said
mm,
before. Secondly, it's probably more fun and you're more likely to stick with it in terms of doing it. But I
mm,
think just from a pure time perspective, like there's only so much that you can do
mm,
with other people, as it were. There's a limit to how much you can do, just time wise. Like people have to get to the top, as it were. You have to spend quite a lot of time doing it, and I don't think you can spend all that time doing it with other people. So you can
mm,
swap notes with people or compare stuff, but there's a limit to what's useful in that regard. Basically, a lot of it is you want to learn the things yourself.
mm.
And so, somebody could give you a book with everything you needed to know, but you still have to go through the effort of learning it and understanding it, whatever. So there's diminishing returns on that.
We talked earlier about you getting yourself ready for that 3 hours of concentration at the WQC. In general, for quizzes, do you have a kind of a mental or physical routine, habits, things you eat, drink, avoid, etc., that kind of feel get you in the right place?
No, not really. Like not like particular things I eat or drink or whatever. I think that hydration is probably one where I've thought about it more in the last few months. Probably does make sense that you get quite dehydrated.
Mm,
Um, I think that on a like having energy readily available to you is probably quite useful. So sugar is probably one of the best performance enhancers for quiz in terms of just like having readily available energy. Like you're probably going to use quite a lot of mental energy. So just having like readily available energy is probably useful in a quiz. There's that, but generally not too much. I mean, I don't know what the best performance enhancers for quiz would be. I really want to see. Maybe this is something that All Things Quiz can fund. I want to see what people like with performance enhancing drugs in quiz. I really genuinely would be really interested.
I'm not sure what those drugs would be.
Probably
Overplaying.
amphetamines is probably like
Mm.
from a genuine perspective, it probably would be the most useful thing. I'm sure people have done it, but no, not me. Um, we have to,
Um,
yeah, be serious.
well, I'm glad we're excluding that. Thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you so much, Gareth. Thanks, everyone.
Massive thanks to Daoud for giving up so much time to speak to us. And if you haven't seen the other part of the interview with him, then check that out now. Thanks also to our Patreon members who support the work of this channel. And from £3 a month, you can become a Patreon at patreon.com/allthingsquiz.